Good evening, class. How's everyone today? As you know, Miss Stevens. So today I want to touch bases on some common challenges students face when learning about fraction. So let's imagine Ellie is baking 2 batches of cookies. One batch needs 3/4 cups of sugar, and the other one needs a half a cup of sugar. The question I pose to my students is, how much sugar does Nellie need for both batches? Now, we have 2 students, which was Gary and Millie, and they gave a response that highlights some interesting misconceptions about fractions. In today's section, we will look at the answers and examine what they might have misunderstood and discuss how to address these issues through a classroom activity. So Gary's response was 4/6 or 2/3. Gary's answer was 4/6, which he simplified into 2/3. Now, why would Gary come up with this? Well, Gary likely added the numerators and the denominators directly, thinking that the correct way to add a fraction. Thinking that that's the correct way to add a fraction. In his mind, 3 + 1 = 4, and 4 + 2 = 6. So his result was 4/6. Simplifying it, he got 2/3. This is a common misconception. Students often think that they should add both the numerators and the denominators when combining fraction. Gary hasn't quite grasped the concept of when adding fractions, the denominators need to be the same before we can add the numerators. Now, with Millie's misconception, Millie, on the other hand, had a different issue. Once she noticed that she had added fractions, her numerators were bigger than the denominators, and she immediately assumed that this meant her answer was wrong. Millie's misunderstanding stems from the frame of mind that a numerator larger than a denominator means a mistake has been made. In fact, improper fractions are completely valid. They are simply represent a quantity greater than 1. In this case, the correct sum of 3/4 and 1/2 is 5/4, which is an improper fraction, but still correct. We could convert it into a mixed number if we wanted, but improper fractions are perfectly fine on their own. So, to address both Gary's and Millie's misconception, I would structure maybe a lesson that dives deeper into how we add fractions with different denominators and how improper fractions work. So we would start by just the introduction of the lesson would start basically by reviewing how to add fractions and with the same denominator. I remind the students that when the denominators are the same, we only add the numerators, not the denominators. This gives us a foundation before moving into the fractions with unlike denominators. Next, I'll introduce the idea of finding a common denominator. I use a visual aid like a fraction strips or a number line to show how fractions with different denominators can be written with the same denominator. This step is critical for students to see why a common denominator is necessary. Now, the next part will be an interactive activity using Nellie's cookie baking scenario, basically. This activity would be teacher guided, in which the students would do step by step through adding 3/4 and 1/2. I showed them how to find a common denominator, in this case 4. I explained that 1/2 can be written as 2/4, and from there we can add 3/4 plus 2/4 to get 5/4. I emphasize that 5/4 is, basically an improper fraction, which is fine because improper fractions are valid. But I would change it to a mixed number just for the sake of the recipe, which would be 1 and 1/4 cups of sugar. Here, I like to take a moment to address any confusion about the improper fraction, explaining that they simply indicate a value greater than 1 and can be converted to a mixed number if absolutely necessary. Following the interactive activity, we will do a group practice. For group work, I give students several fractions addition problems where they would need to find a common denominator before adding. Each group would, work together to rewrite the fractions with like denominators, add them, and simplify them to get the results necessary. I also work with them on, I also circulate, just basically going through the room to provide guidance, especially ensuring students like Gary understanding why the denominator is incorrect. Following the group practice, we will do a class discussion. This just discussing some common misconceptions. Why isn't mine right? Basically, at the end of the group work, we come back together and talk about what we learned. We revisit Gary's misconception, clarifying why denominators can't be added, and Millie's error, reinforcing that improper fractions are normal and useful. I also will address any other misconceptions that may come up. For example, if students are still unsure about simplifying fractions or converting improper fractions to mixed number, we'll go over that as needed. To close everything out and wrap the lesson up, we would basically make sure we recognize that fraction misconceptions are really common, but with clear guidance and plenty of practice, students can overcome them. Visual aids, hands-on activity, and clear explanations can make a very huge difference with the students, helping them to learn like Gary. And students like Gary and Millie to gain confidence. By the end of this lesson, I want them to feel comfortable with adding fraction and understanding improper fractions.